Session is resumed. The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Onasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 senators are present. The Chair declares the presence of the quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 78th Session, June 2, 2014, and consider the same as approved.
Any objections? Hearing none, the reading of the Journal of Monday, June 2, 2014 is dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Committee Report number 30 on Senate Resolution numbers 436 and 439 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
With the permission of the Majority Leader, can we first have the reference of business?
I move for the reference of business, Mr. President.
Secretary will read the reference of
Messages of the President of the Philippines. Letter of His Excellency, President Benigno S. Aquino III, dated 26 May 2014, certifying to the necessity of the immediate enactment of House Number 4296, entitled An Act Mandating the Completion of the Land Acquisition and Distribution Component of the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program pursuant to Republic Act Number 6657, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Laws amended, in order to address the immediate need to extend the operation of the Land Acquisition and Distribution Program under the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, set to expire on 30 June 2014. As a constitutionally mandated undertaking, it is imperative that the state ensures the program's efficacy is extended. The certification of House Bill number 4296 provides concurrence the 1999 Montreal Convention for the Unification of Certain Rules for International Carriage by Air, which was signed on 28 May 1999 in Montreal.
Foreign Relations.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2266, an act to promote cost-effective measures for the transport sector and commuting public, providing for the creation of a National Transportation Safety Board, prescribing its powers and functions, and appropriating funds, therefore, Senator Grace Poe.
Committee on Civil Service and Government Organizations, Public Services, and Finance.
Senate number 2267, an act to further protect Philippine corals, Senator Grace Poe.
Committee on Agriculture and Food, Environment, and Natural Resources.
Resolutions, PS Resolution number 681, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the failure of government units to warn and protect the citizens and tourists of Pangasinan against jellyfish attacks by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Health and Demography, Local Governments.
PS Resolution number 682, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that bamboo and not steel bars were used for reinforcement and destroyed school building in Palo, Leyte. But many Philippine towns are still without fire trucks by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Local Government.
PS Resolution number 684, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that workers are being hired then fired every 5 months to avoid regularization under the law, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Labor, Employment, Human Resources Development.
PS Resolution number 685, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on reports that syndicates use courier cargo services to deliver illegal drugs nationwide by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, Public Services.
PS Resolution number 686, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that firearms worth nearly 12 million pesos are missing from the headquarters of the Philippine National Police, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
PS Resolution number 687, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported cholera outbreak in Alamada, Cotabato by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Health and Demography.
PS Resolution number 688, congratulating Nonito Donaire Jr. for winning the May 31, 2014 World Boxing Association Featherweight Championship title at the Cotai Arena of the Venetian Resort in Macau by Senator Maria Lourdes.
Rules.
Yes, Resolution number 689. Congratulating and commending Nonito, the Filipino Flash, Donaire Jr. for winning the World Boxing Association Featherweight title against South African Simpewe Vicheka at the Venetian Hotel and Casino in Macau, China on May 31, 2014 by Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Rules.
Additional reference of business. Committee reports. Committee report number 37 submitted by the Committee on Labor, Employment and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation on Senate number 1291 introduced by Senator Ejercito without amendment, sponsored Senator Pimentel III.
Calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Made in aid of legislation on the alleged or purported overpriced and substandard bunk houses meant for to sponsor Committee Report number 30.
Senator Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is recognized to sponsor the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, today it is my honor as Chairman of the Committee on Public Works to sponsor Committee Report number 30 that contains the comprehensive report on the bunk houses constructed to serve as temporary shelters for the victims of Super Typhoon Yolanda. 7 months ago, the whole country was horrified by the unprecedented monstrous typhoon Yolanda that claimed almost 7,000 lives and has caused unspeakable destruction that left 90% of the Visayas region ravaged. With more than 200,000 families displaced by Yolanda and more than 500,000 houses wiped out, generous international and local donors, moved by sympathy and compassion, immediately mobilized global assistance to help the estimated 17 million people in 44 provinces and 171 cities and municipalities recover from the tragedy. Like everybody else, I was shocked by the magnitude of the devastation and at some point almost refused to believe that it had happened and could happen again. But life goes on, and we have to face the Herculean challenges ahead. On the 18th of November 2013, after identifying temporary shelters, the government started building bunk houses in Leyte and Eastern Samar, which were earmarked to serve as temporary shelters for the families rendered homeless by the typhoon. Secretary Panfilo Lacson, Presidential Assistant, on international criteria. The initial finding was bolstered by reports of an alleged collusion. In January 2014, Secretary Lacson requested the Criminal Investigative and Detection Group, the CIDG, to, quote, conduct an investigation into the said allegations for the purpose of filing the appropriate charges against the perpetrators, if any, close quote. This led to the filing of Senate Resolutions 436 and 439 by Senators Miriam Defensor Santiago and this representation, respectively, in order to determine if indeed the bunk houses were truly substandard and overpriced as alleged. Likewise, to make sure that corrective measures at the committee hearing on 6 February 2014 and on 13 February 2014, subsequently inspected the subject bunk houses in Barangay 62, 95, 91 in Tacloban, and Barangay Takuranga and Pawing in Palo, province of Leyte. During the hearing, the committee was able to unravel some of the important facts in connection to and surrounding the subject of bunk houses. The bunk houses plans were drawn up in detail by the Department of Public Works and Highways. The construction materials for these temporary shelters consisted of coco lumber, corrugated galvanized iron roofing sheets, and marine and ordinary plywood. The floor area of the bunk houses with a common toilet and bath totaled 255.28 square meters. With an estimated total cost of 959,345 pesos, the DPWH had asked the contractors to reduce the price of the bunk houses to 836,018 pesos by netting out the profit margin and overhead expenses. When the construction of the bunk houses were about to start, it was reported that many local contractors were not available to undertake the civil works as mandated or in time for Christmas because of the fact that the materials needed per specification of the DPWH were not immediately available. To beat the deadline, the contractors went on to start building the bunkhouses using whatever materials were available, even though they were not necessarily in conformity with the specifications prescribed by the Department of Public Highways. This meant that substitutes or alternatives in terms of materials were used instead. As of 30 January 2014, the committee was informed that 54 families had already occupied the bunkhouses. Per the DSWD, the award of each bunkhouse to the family occupants was undertaken through a joint assessment by the Department of Social Welfare and Development with its regional offices and the local government units concerned. Given the aforementioned factual background, your committee has identified three major issues that need to be addressed and resolved in the course of the investigation. One, whether or not the subject bunkhouses were truly substandard and overpriced, as alleged. Two, whether or not the design of the bunkhouses was in accordance with international standards and current practices in the buildings of transitional houses. And three, whether or not there existed a collusion between the private contractors and, again, quote, at least one politician, close quote, that led to the suspicion that there was an anomaly in the construction of the bunkhouses. After thorough deliberations and careful inspection of the subject bunkhouses, your committee respectfully submits the following findings. The bunkhouses are under specification, as laid down by the Department of Public Works and Highways, thereby making them technically substandard. This is mainly due to the following reasons. The unavailability at that time of construction PWH. It is noteworthy to state, however, that despite the deficiencies, the questioned quality of the bunkhouse units are being remedied, and that necessary corrections have been undertaken by the contractors. It is unfortunate that the technical and structural designs set forth by the DPWH were not complied with by the contractors, but it is understandable because the specified construction materials were houses were not overpriced, since the contractors had not been paid even with a single centavo for their expenses that they incurred in building the structures. Furthermore, price adjustment is a reasonable option as long as the underspecified materials are within the minimum standard of the DPWH. It was clear from the testimony of Secretary Rogelio Singson of DPWH that no payment, much less any down payment, had been made to the bunkhouses contractors, who eventually were even required to correct the noted deficiencies and flaws of the shelters. The use of under-specification materials was not intentional, but because the agreed materials were not readily available at the time when they were constructed, the contractors were required to construct within a period of 30 days to provide temporary shelter to our countrymen. Secretary Singson further explained that they are contemplating to make the necessary adjustments and corresponding deductions to the contract price of the bunkhouses so long as the questioned materials will meet the minimum requirements of the DPWH. The said move is acceptable and appears reasonable to the committee considering the attendant circumstances that were present during the construction of the bunkhouses. As regards the issue of non-compliance with international standards for bunkhouses, the committee found that ideally the guidelines in constructing temporary or transitional houses, among others, for people displaced by natural or man-made calamities are spelled out in the Sphere Handbook of International Standards. This handbook, which has been used by several countries devastated by great calamities, contains life-saving humanitarian response to people affected and displaced by disasters. Nonetheless, the question raised was, has this been followed in the construction of the bunkhouses in the Visayas region? The conclusion is that the bunkhouses are not in compliance with the international standards in building transitional houses. This is precisely because these were built using the available materials and resources which were not necessarily according to spec. The prevailing emergency situation then compelled the government to undertake the immediate construction of the bunkhouses despite the lack of quality resources, with the objective of saving lives, which was considered as far more important than complying with the requirements of the law when compliance could not be possible given the constraint of time and resources. Your committee on Public Works likewise looked into the alleged collusion between the private contractors and at least one politician that allegedly tainted the construction of the bunkhouses with anomaly. During the committee hearing, it was learned that Secretary Lacson had tasked the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group of the Philippine National Police to investigate the matter thoroughly. Police Chief Superintendent Benjamin Magalong of the CIDG testified that Secretary Lacson never mentioned any name of a politician involved in the alleged anomaly. The CIDG, however, assured the committee of its commitment to undertake a more thorough investigation on this specific issue of collusion, and should there exist supporting evidence to prove the alleged anomaly, the issue would be addressed forthwith by pursuing the proper legal action against persons or entities found responsible for any irregularity. Also, in the course of the investigation, it was revealed that the Department of Social Welfare and Development had imposed stringent requirements for families to be qualified for temporary shelter units. The extremely long and arduous bureaucratic processes have prevented family beneficiaries to immediately occupy the bunkhouses despite the emergency situation that they were confronted with. This actually negated the earnest efforts and goals of the national and local governments to ensure and secure the welfare of the family casualties who continued to be exposed to the man-made and natural hazards as they could not immediately transfer to the reserved bunkhouses due to impractical technicalities set forth by the DSWD and which could not be complied with given the loss of documents and other required data and information that had to be submitted to the DSWD. In view of the foregoing, it is respectfully recommended that, number 1, legislative measures should be introduced amending Republic Act number 6541 as amended by Presidential Decree 1096 or the National Building Code and other related laws that would clearly define the minimum design guidelines in building temporary structures and even permanent evacuation centers to be built in local government units in calamity-prone areas. The proposal to create the Department of Housing and Urban Development, introduced in both houses of Congress, should be expeditiously approved in order to have a specific government agency that would be focused on the housing or shelter needs of the people. Number 3, a legislative measure should likewise be introduced for possible amendment to Republic Act 9184 or the Government Procurement Reform Act that will introduce provisions that prevent unscrupulous contractors, government officials, and employees from taking advantage of the emergency situation when the construction of buildings have to be undertaken as an aftermath of disasters by simply resorting to the use of substandard materials, thereby compromising the structural integrity and livable quality of the structures. Number 4, the DSWD should be flexible enough to simplify the process and procedure of identifying family beneficiaries qualified for comprehensive assistance from the government, giving priority to the provisions of basic and important necessities of the most needy and endangered. Number 5, the CIDG investigation on the reported collusion between private contractors and at least one politician that raised suspicion of alleged irregularities in the construction of the bunkhouses should be vigorously and expeditiously pursued. Should the evidence warrant, appropriate administrative, criminal, and civil charges will be filed against the perpetrators. With the catastrophic horrors of Yolanda, our readiness to respond to such unprecedented scale of destruction has certainly been put to the test. Admittedly, we can honestly claim that much has been learned from this disaster and other less devastating calamities. As we move on beyond the pain from this tragedy, we are now armed with a more resilient spirit and a firm resolve to face whatever future challenges nature confronts us with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of committee report number 30 on proposed Senate resolution numbers 436 and 439.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2159 under Committee Report number 33. This is the Foreign Banks Bill, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Resumption of consideration of Senate Bill 2159 under Committee Report number 33 is in order.
Mr. President, with the debates closed, I move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Period of committee amendments is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, the gentleman from Cebu, Senator Osmeña.
Senator Sergio Osmeña III is recognized on the period of committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, may I be permitted to place on record the request and intention of the Senadora from Las Piñas, Cynthia Villar, to be made a co-author of this bill. With your approval, Mr. President.
There's a motion, Mr. President, that Senator Villar be made a co-author of the bill.
Senator Villar is so made a co-author.
Mr. President, the committee has a few amendments, mostly editorial in
with the permission of the chamber,
1 minute.
1 minute suspension.
Is this the amended? I move to resume, Mr. President. No, it's okay. Sige. Yung minagic ni Noet dito.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, with the indulgence of the sponsor, the chairman of the Committee on Banks, I move that we recognize the lady from Las Piñas, the lady senator, Senator Villar, for a manifestation.
Senator Cynthia Villar is recognized for a manifestation with the permission of the gentleman from Cebu, the sponsor of the measure.
Certainly, Mr. President.
Please proceed, Senator Villar.
Mr. President, I just want to make some clarification with regards to the bill of our distinguished senator from Cebu on liberalization of foreign banks. I want to ask our senator from Cebu, how can a foreign bank give real estate loan to our citizen when it is not allowed to own real estate property in the Philippines? So how will the documentation be done that they cannot own real estate property and yet they can give real estate loan to Filipinos?
You mean
The
real
gentleman
estate?
from Cebu may respond if he so wishes.
I guess the senator from Las Piñas means collateralized by real estate and foreclosable.
Yes.
There is a new section in the law, Mr. President, which reads as follows: participation in foreclosure proceedings, period. Foreign banks which are authorized to do banking business in the Philippines through any of its modes of entry under Section 2 shall be allowed to bid and take part in foreclosure sales of real property mortgaged to them, as well as to avail of enforcement and other proceedings, and accordingly take possession of the mortgaged property for a period not exceeding 5 years from actual possession, provided that in no event shall title to the property be transferred to the foreign bank. In case said bank is the winning bidder, it shall, during the said 5-year period, transfer its rights to a qualified Philippine national without prejudice to a borrower's rights under equitable laws. Should the bank fail to transfer such property within the 5-year period, it shall be penalized 0.5% per annum of the price at which the property was foreclosed until it is able to transfer the property to a qualified Philippine national.
Also very limited.
That is the end of Section 6.
Thank you very much, Senator Osmeña. I think that is a very good clarification, because I believe if we're going to encourage foreign banks to operate in the Philippines, then they should be able to do real estate mortgage. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for them to operate in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for my
The
co-author.
Sponsor may now proceed with the committee amendments.
Okay.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2159.
Consideration of the measure is suspended. Continue.
Jingo sponsorship.
I have to leave. I'm sick and I have an appointment.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number 136 under Committee Report number 37 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
I move that we consider Senate Bill number 136 under Committee Report number 37.
Consideration of the measure is in order.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act reforming the National Apprenticeship Program and providing standards for the training and employment of apprentices and regulatory standards for accreditation of apprenticeship programs.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the Chairman of the Committee on Labor, Senator Jingoy Estrada, to sponsor the measure.
Senator Estrada is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on my second term as a senator and in my capacity as chairman of the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resource Development, I wish to leave behind a landmark legislation that will help address the persistent and unabated problem of unemployment in our country. A recent survey of the social weather stations claims that joblessness reached 25.7%, which is equivalent to an estimated 11.5 million adult Filipinos. Additionally, a member of the cabinet of the present administration admits that much more needs to be done to create even more meaningful job opportunities for a large number of Filipinos. It is thus a privilege to sponsor Committee Report Number 37, the Apprenticeship Training Act of 2014, which seeks to institute reforms and conduct massive advocacy on the apprenticeship program to encourage both the enterprises and prospective apprentices in order to promote skills acquisition and youth employment. Apprenticeship in the Philippines has been implemented as a system both for training and employment. For the past 50 years or so, the apprenticeship program has become more employment-oriented and its training orientation has been given less attention. In 1994, with the passage of Republic Act 7796, the management of the program was transferred from the DOLE, which gives emphasis on skills training. The objective was to ensure that a steady supply of skilled workers would be made available through a strong collaboration between TESDA and the enterprises. Since the program's transfer to TESDA, however, the expected reforms on the program's implementation did not fully materialize. It remained to be governed based on the provisions of the Labor Code. It was further hampered by the provision of Executive Order 111 issued in 1986 that limited the training duration to only 6 months. Because of this, the program did not get much needed support from employers. The apprentices, on the other hand, view it as an employment option rather than as a tool for skill formation. For the past 5 years, Mr. President, the number of enterprises participating in the program has remained very low. As of 2013, there were only 875 enterprises with registered programs with TESDA. The number of apprentices, on the other hand, reached only an average of 65,000 every year, which represents only 4% of the total population of the TVET graduates. ADB study reveals that the Philippine youth not in employment, education, or training rate is relatively high compared to other countries. There are about 1 in 4 youth who are outside employment and education and training system. Majority of those are women and young people from lower income family. Given the current problem of growing youth unemployment and the existing job skills mismatch, there is a need to strengthen the implementation of the program. The training the youth would get through apprenticeship would give them the competencies and the experience to qualify for existing and future jobs. This calls for comprehensive reforms in the implementation of the apprenticeship program, which could be done only through the amendment of the relevant provision of the Labor Code and Executive Order 111. In particular, the reforms shall be covered by the following provisions of the proposed bill. Number 1, making the apprenticeship program purely a training program so that the focus would be on the skills development of the apprentices within enterprises. Number 2, provision for a well-structured combination of theoretical and practical instruction that would be indicated in the training plan to be submitted by the enterprise. Number 3, apprenticeable qualifications including the competencies to be learned to be promulgated by the TESDA board. Number 4, apprenticeship period to be determined based on the complexity of the skills to be learned by the apprentices. Number 5, registration of apprenticeship program can be by qualification, cluster of competencies, or unit of competency. Bundling of qualification is likewise allowed. Number 6, issuance of a training certificate to the apprentice is mandatory for the company. Number 7, application of dual training system approach as to the apprenticeship scheme. Number 8, exemption of certified apprenticeship graduates from probationary employment once retained or absorbed as regular workers by the enterprise. Number 9, application of a system of equivalency in the program that would make completion of apprenticeship comparable to a formal training program in a technical and vocational education and training institution. Number 10, compulsory training of apprentices in certain trade, occupations, jobs, or employment levels where shortage of trained manpower is deemed critical as determined by the TESTA board. Number 11, mandatory competency assessment of apprentices on certification of passers. And last, creation of apprenticeship training fund, which shall be derived from the apprenticeship fee paid by every firm owner in industries employing workers in apprenticeable qualifications. Mr. President, I am confident that the members of this chamber shall be in the forefront to support a measure that will help address the problem of unemployment in our country. Thus, I earnestly seek the immediate approval of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Estrada. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 136 under Committee Report number 37.
Consideration of the measure is hereby suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2159 under Committee Report number 33, the Foreign Banks Bill.
In objection, hearing none, resumption of consideration of Senate Bill number 2159 under Committee Report number 33 is in order.
The parliamentary status, Mr. President, that we are in the period of committee amendments. I move that we recognize the sponsor, the chairman of the Committee on Banks, Senator Osmeña.
Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following committee amendments would start on page 2, line 12. The phrase "in its country of origin" is inserted after the phrase "publicly listed." So it will now read as follows: the foreign bank applicant must be widely owned and publicly listed in its country of origin unless the foreign bank applicant is owned by the government of its country of origin. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is approved.
Our next amendment would be on page 2, lines 17 to 32. Lines 17 to 32.
917 to 32.
After the phrase "at least 70%, to insert the phrase "or any such amount as may be determined by the Monetary Board, comma." I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The next would come on line 22. After the phrase "as the national interest may require," period, to delete the bracket "II," which is to prevent a dominant market position by one bank or concentration of economic power.
The amendment is to delete the bracket, Mr. Sponsor,
To delete the brackets.
which means to reinstate the II, etc. Is that correct, Mr. Sponsor?
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I have two different copies. 1 minute suspension. 'cause
Suspended for
I
1
want you
minute.
to sit down here. Motion to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed. We are now on line 22
Line 22, after
on
the
page 2.
That's correct. On line 22, after the phrase "time as the national interest may require," period, to begin a new sentence which will read, "The monetary board shall," then in parentheses, Roman number 1, close parentheses, deleting the double I in parentheses. So it will just be the monetary board shall, 1, prevent a dominant market position.
Etc., etc. All right. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
How the hell would they know it's line 26? On line 26, Mr. President, to delete the triple I, which is in parentheses, and add the words "and," Roman numeral 2, which is also in parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On line 32 of the same page, Mr. President, we remove the closing bracket after the word Philippines, period.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, Mr. President, section 5, line 28, a typographical error, category must read category. I submit, Mr. President.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
What about this? Is this new or existing? Huh? Is this new or what? The bracket. Existing. Next. On page 4, lines 32 to 33, all the way to page 5, lines 1 to 3, Mr. President. On line 32, to delete the phrase "provided, however, that the Monetary Board may prescribe a higher single borrower limit for a foreign branch up to the equivalent of its permanently assigned capital for the purpose of promoting foreign investments, and to include the phrase, the single borrower's limit for a domestic bank or foreign bank shall be 25% of its net worth. In parentheses, 25% in Arabic numerals. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved. Will the good sponsor now state for the record how the new Section 8 will read like after the amendment that was approved?
Gladly, Mr. President. Section 8, equal treatment. Foreign banks authorized to operate under Section 2 of this Act, comma, shall perform the same functions, comma, enjoy the same privileges, comma, and be subject to the same limitations imposed upon a Philippine bank of the same category. The single borrower's limit for a domestic bank or foreign bank shall be 25% of its net worth. Period. That is the extent of the...
All right. So noted. That's now how Section 8 will read.
Right. Our next amendment falls on page 7, line 7 to 8. We merely delete the bracket after the word act and before the word after. That's the opening bracket. And we delete the closing bracket after the phrase Senate of the Philippines. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
That is the extent of the committee amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Majority Leader, a motion for the closure of the committee amendment is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
I move that we, Mr. President, suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2159 under Committee Report number 33.
The understanding of the chair is that there will be individual amendments to be presented.
There have been no individual amendments proposed, Mr. President, although I don't know if the majority leader has any.
If there are no individual amendments proposed,
I withdraw my earlier motion, Mr. President, and I move, if there are no other amendments, we move that we close the period of amendments.
Period for amendments is closed.
If there are no other individual amendments, then we can move to approve on second reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 2159 under Committee Report number 33 is hereby approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend for a few minutes.
Okay. Consideration of Senate Bill number 2159 is suspended. So what? Suspended for 1 minute. Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2211 under Committee Report number 25. This is the Philippine Lemon Law of 2014. I so move.
Senate Bill 2211 consideration of Senate Bill 2211 is in order.
Mr. President, the debates are closed, and may we move to recognize the sponsor, Senator Bam Aquino, for the period of committee amendments.
Senator Aquino is recognized on the period of committee amendments.
Mr. President, we have no committee amendments.
Please proceed.
I move that we close the period for committee amendments and open the period of individual amendments, Mr.
The
President.
period of committee amendments is terminated. The period for individual amendments is in order.
I move that we recognize the Assistant Minority Leader, Senator Soto, to propose individual amendments.
Senator Soto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to thank the sponsor, the distinguished sponsor, for discussing this proposed amendment of mine. This involves the definition of an importer and the inclusion of importers in the bill. We discussed it thoroughly, and he agreed and concurred with my proposal that importers, particularly in the gray market, should not be included in this law, Mr. President. It is precisely that, it is detrimental to the legal distributors, the manufacturers here in the Philippines, if the importers are included. So, may I propose on page 2, lines 21 to 22, delete the entire definition of importer. In that case, it removes any reference to any importer as far as the lemon law is concerned, Mr. President.
So accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Yes.
Lines 21 and 22 are deleted upon motion of the of Senator Soto, which amendment is accepted by the sponsor. Any objection? Hearing none. Adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me also place it on record that I make this as my disclosure of probably benefiting from the law, because I used to be chairman and part owner of Auto House BMW, the distributor of BMW in the Philippines. I am no longer chairman, although I have very minimal share, because when I became the Dangerous Drugs Board chairman, I divested my properties then. But then again, we know that this law will also help the legal distributors in the country. So thank you. Thanks to the chairman, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Sponsor, the chair has a few items. First, we re-letter line 23. Instead of J, this becomes letter I.
Yes, Mr. President.
And line 24, letter K becomes letter J.
Thank you very much, Mr. President,
Now,
for those.
just a question from the chair. The sponsor and agreed to the deletion of 21, lines 21 and 22 on page 2. This was approved. Is there any reference to importer in the rest of the measure?
No, Mr. President. In fact, it was never the intention to include importers to begin with, but there was some confusion because it was defined in the law. Probably a remnant of a previous version, Mr. President, that was not corrected. So we are deleting that line also to clarify that they really are not intended to be part of this bill, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Yes, Majority Leader.
Mr. President, no other senator has expressed his or her intent to propose individual amendments. I move that we close the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, period for individual amendment on Senate Bill number 2211 is hereby terminated.
I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2211 under Committee Report number 25, or the Lemon Law.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 2211 under Committee Report number 25 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend session for a few minutes.
Consideration of the measure is suspended And the session is suspended also for a few minutes. Wala, suspended.
Picture based. Mag-amend si Manang yata. Tanong mo, ang sagot ko, I don't know. I've not seen the chairman. Let's go with him. Official OB ba siya? Which one? Parang OB ang nagot. Sino ba? After ako makapaling hinahanap ko lang. May forward, may backward. Investigation. So, official mission. Pero pwede naman sa break. Ang gagawin natin sa picture.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 27 under Committee Report number 19. This is the picture-based health warning bill, Mr. President.
The consideration of Senate Bill number 27 is in order.
The parliamentary status, Mr. President, is that we are in the period of individual amendments. I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Senator Pia Cayetano, this principal sponsor, is recognized.
I move that we recognize the minority leader to introduce amendments to the measure.
Senator Juan Ponce Enrile is recognized. Before the amendments are proposed, for the record, the chair is referring to the amended copy as of May 28, 2014 as the basis of the debates so that we can follow it correctly.
That's correct.
Thank you, Senator Enrile. The gentle lady and the gentleman may now proceed.
Mr. President, I would like to propose an additional amendments. First amendment is on page 8 under section 14 on line 20. Delete the word made and replace the same with the word imposed.
Imposed. Instead of made, imposed.
Yes.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On line 21, delete the words quote or other unquote. On the same page, same section 14.
What does the sponsor say?
We're prepared to accept, but let's ask the proponent to read the whole line. I think it includes something on line 22 to complete the amendment.
Yes. That will, on line 22, delete the phrase appropriate body.
Yes, we are accepting the deletion of the phrase or other appropriate body.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
That's about it, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Enrile.
Thank you also to Senator Enrile.
Are there other amendments?
Mr. President, I have a...
is Senator
yes.
Enrile through with his amendments?
Are
you finished with that?
Yes.
Yes. While Senator Enrile is still on the floor...
She's through. That
Yes.
was the last amendment.
Yes, Mr. President. And I had discussed with him earlier that I will move for a reconsideration of a previous amendment he made, and we have agreed on it, so I would like to put it on record now, Mr. President.
Please proceed.
So on page 8A of the same draft, section 15, line 29, delete the phrase, the manufacturers and importers of cigarettes and tobacco products as well as.
All right. On lines 29 and 29A, the phrase, the manufacturers and importers of cigarettes and tobacco products as well as is hereby deleted, which, for the record, is a matter that was agreed upon between the sponsor and Senator Enrile.
Yes. And I would just like to put on record, Mr. President, that this is based on the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which the Philippines is a signatory to, wherein the Philippines has the obligation to protect the setting and implementation of its policies with respect to tobacco control. Specifically, it takes due recognition of the fact that there is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry's interests and public health policies. And as such, the party should not allow any person to make recommendations such as those that we provided for. This is also a concern raised by Senator Miriam, and with the consent of the proponent, we are deleting it from the bill.
I confirm the same, Mr. President.
All right. Any objection? The Enrile amendment accepted by the sponsor is hereby approved. Senator Soto, on the period of individual amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished kind lady listen and accept some of my proposed amendments, Mr. President?
We will be happy to listen and hope we can accommodate His Honor's amendments.
Thank you. Let me start, Mr. President, on page 3, line 17. And as you said, based on the amended copy as of May 28, 2014. Page 3, line 17, I propose to delete the term master cases. Thus, Section 4E will now read as follows. E, tobacco product package means the packet and package of tobacco products and any outside packaging and labeling of tobacco products for sale and distribution in the domestic market, importation, trade, exchange, or for exhibition, such as but not limited to packs, tins, boxes, pouches, flip-tops, slide and shell packages, cartons, packages containing one product unit, or other containers of tobacco products containing the logo or trademark of the tobacco companies. The reason, Mr. President, is that we would like to ask for your consideration and reconsideration on the inclusion of master cases in the definition of tobacco product package under Section 4E. Because if graphic health warnings are printed on master cases using a similar printing process for packs, the strength and the integrity of the master cases will be severely compromised. This is because multiple passes over the master case during printing process will weaken the strength of the master case. Hence, the master case no longer becomes usable for transport purposes. And as a matter of fact, to prove this point, Mr. President, and to ask for your consideration, there is no country in the world that prints graphic or even textual health warnings on master cases. There is also no printing technology capable of printing large picture-based health warnings on master cases using the standards provided by this measure. So simply put, there is no supplier at present that can print GHWs on master cases, either here or globally, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
Yes. During the amendment period with Senator Enrile, a similar amendment was made, and the reason why the amendment was not carried is because the concern was that in the Philippines, particularly in the provinces, these boxes are used for display intentionally or unintentionally because there's no bodega space, and it is used and reused to transport products. And so these packages, which bear the logo of the cigarette companies, will continually be advertised, particularly to the most vulnerable, which is the youth, and it will not have any corresponding warning. But I do understand the concern raised by His Honor, and what I would like to propose then is that, what I had proposed when Senator Enrile made the amendment is that we do away with, if they will agree not to have their label on the package, then we don't have to have a corresponding graphic warning. Or if the label will be there, then we can agree on a different kind of warning, but there must be some kind. So if it will be a single color, there must be some kind, because I have, and I'm happy to share it, I have a picture in my iPhone on the cartons, which are this big, and the logo is this big. So there must be some kind corresponding warning. I don't mind that it does not have the same quality or even, you know, the full color that we have on the cigarettes, but I think we must address this, because even I see it, no, these cartons are used as a substitute shelter, as a container. So that is the burden that I have to deal with, Mr. President.
Why don't we meet halfway then, Mr. President? Why don't we just agree on text? The text, not the picture already, because you're talking about colors. You're talking about that's the one that makes it unusable. Pagka numipis ho yung o sumama ho ang quality ng master cases. Besides, Mr. President, kung ang target nga natin yung mga youth and all that, I do agree that ginagamit nila sa other everywhere else, no? But karamihan na makakakita nito yung mga kargador nung master cases Mas maraming kargador makakakita nito kaysa sa makakakita nito sa ng mga bumibili o ng kabataan So, siguro kahit text, payagan natin, wag na lang yung graphic health warning. It becomes very expensive for we're already burdening the tobacco industry. Lalong madadagdagan pa rito.
If I may ask the proponent if we could leave this and let me look for alternative wording, and then we can take it up within the day session, so we can explore.
Yes.
I would like
All
to
right.
explore the recommendation of His Honor, but this being a graphic health warning bill, let me see if there's something we can propose and agree upon.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. President. I move to table the proposed amendment, Mr. President.
Would you prefer that we suspend for a while?
No, Mr. President, so we can
Okay.
go on because I can have
All right.
somebody
I move to
look at
table
this so
the
we don't-
proposed amendment, Mr.
Okay,
President.
okay.
Okay.
Please proceed, yes.
Thank you then.
The proposed amendment is tabled for further discussion later.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
President. Let me move on to page 3A, lines 23 to 24. I will propose the amendment, then explain a little, and this is something to do with another amendment that is forthcoming. So let me start off on lines 23 to 24. Delete the phrase "found in the market" and replace the same with the phrase "manufactured or imported in the Philippines." This is in relation to my next amendment dealing with the exhaustion period, Mr. President. We are providing, kasi po, we are providing for a 1-year transition period. But we believe that we should provide for an exhaustion period.
For
Kasi,
what?
kasi po,
Exhaustion period.
yung after 1 year hindi na pwedeng magbenta nung walang graphic health warning, hindi po ba?
Yes.
Pero yung mga minanufacture nila na binibenta during the transition period, baka nandoon pa at hindi pa nauubos. So in other words, if we do not put an exhaustion period, the manufacturers cannot manufacture, cannot make during that period. Well, that goes to the next proposed amendment. Kaya po ito muna yung sinasabi ko. Would you like me to go on to that
Yes, so
one?
we can
Okay.
see the full picture.
Sige, okay. Now, that will go on page 6, line 19A. Delete the phrase "from the issuance of the templates by the DOH" and replace them with "after the end of the transition period." Again, as I was saying earlier, the committee report does not allow for a exhaustion period. From text to graphic, and can you please give this to the sponsor, Mr. President? The page, Mr. President, may I be allowed? From text to graphic, manufacturers have sought a transition period of from 12 to 14 months to allow them to acquire, install, and test machines that will be used to print picture health warnings. At the end of the 12-month period, which we can call as the transition date, manufacturers shall withdraw packs with graphic health warnings as required under the bill. On the other hand, manufacturers and supply chain, namely distributors, wholesalers, and retailers, need a reasonable period of time to exhaust old stocks or those that still bear textual health warnings. So we believe that the transition period and its transition date are distinct from the exhaustion period. The exhaustion period must be tacked on to the transition date. The transition period of 12 months should be counted from the date of the initial set of health warnings released by the regulator. On the other hand, the exhaustion period should be counted from the transition date, defined as the first day of the manufacturer's.
So we're talking about 24 months already, Senator Soto?
I beg your pardon?
We are talking already about 24 months from the time the template is issued?
Hindi po. 12 months yung transition. After 12 months, dapat naka-graphic health warnings na po, di ba? Pero yung mga natira, or yung pwede pang ibenta after 12 months. I mean, until another 12 months.
Well,
pwede pang mabenta
at
yung...
that point, the cigarettes are already in the sari-sari store, and you know, the exhaustion period will be indeterminate because
Di nga ho, kaya nga ang bibigyan naman natin ng limit is another 12 months.
Yes. Thank you for the points that you raised. Mr. President, we had numerous dialogues with the tobacco industry, and it will be recalled that the initial proposal in the Senate bill is 90 days. And during our dialogue with the different members of the industry, some were even amenable or were requesting that the 90 days be extended, but they were already amenable with 6 months. In fact, I think there was another one who was amenable to 4 months. But after consultation with my staff and with many other concerned, we agreed that 12 months would already cover both transition and exhaustion. So this was actually,
okay.
Mr. President, with all due respect, but to let the whole body, to allow you to be privy to these dialogues that we had, the industry was very much aware that the 12, in fact, I think they were surprised, and they did express, they said that they were surprised that we, in fact, in the committee report, immediately granted them 12 months, because during the dialogues, we were really at 90 days to 6 months. So the idea really, Mr. President, was for the 12 months to already provide for that exhaustion period, because we acknowledge that we did not want a situation where they are able to rush the transition, say, in 90 days or in 4 months, and then we will have a problem implementing, because there is there really will remain products in the market after 4 months. And that's why we were very generous in extending this all the way up to 1 year. So that is the reality, Mr. President.
the chair confirms that the chair was present in one of these meetings. And in fact, one of the manufacturers put it in writing in a position paper saying that they are agreeable to 9 months.
9 months.
9 months. And now the committee report indicates 12 months, which is even longer than what one of the manufacturers stated in writing. So I believe, Senator Soto, with all due respect,
Okay, yes.
that
May I just ask
yes,
a question?
please.
Mr. President? The company or the manufacturer who, is that the manufacturer who presented that proposal or an importer? Kasi kung importer, kayang-kaya nila eh. Yung 9 months or even 6 months.
Yeah, but
I'm checking, I'm confirming, Mr. President. I think we're...
If this is a manufacturer, I will withdraw the proposal.
there were manufacturers there, and one manufacturer raised a concern. The other manufacturer agreed to the
Actually,
proposal.
from what I recall, one of those who proposed a shorter period was JTI. The other one was British American Tobacco. But then the group representing Philip Morris did not really, they were asking for more time, but definitely I know that they were pleasantly surprised that we gave them 12 months, because 12 months, Mr. President, was not even on the floor. We were really looking at 6 months. So, with all due respect, I do believe that we have given more than we can. And I'd like to also put on record that the reality is, if in good faith they will be implementing the principles behind this bill, really, within 12 months, from what I understand of the manufacturing process, mauubos naman po talaga yung old stock nila. So, hindi na dapat umabot yung old stock nila talaga dun sa 1 year. In other words, with before the 12-month period, they would have the new products with labels, and naubos na rin talaga yung old stock nila. In fact, para hindi sila maubusan ng stock, I would imagine that maybe within 9 months or 10 months, they're replenishing. They might even be complying beforehand. Kasi nga naman, they would want their product on the market. I think it's impossible for them to assume that they will only put out the graphic warnings on day 1 after 1 year. Then they will not have products in the market. So the law simply put together that transition and exhaustion period for them. Pero bahala na sila if they want to put the products in the market on the 9th month, on the 10th month, on the 11th month, so that they don't run out of stock. Now, if they will produce new stock without graphic warning on the 11th month, kasalanan na po nila yun kasi they know that they have to comply within 12 months.
May I have a 1 minute suspension?
1 minute
Mr. President?
suspension. Session is resumed.
Thank you. Mr. President, well, anyway, during the break, we tried to inform the sponsor that there is the information that I gathered is that there is a possibility that the tobacco industry has to slow down because they can no longer manufacture without graphic health warnings until they set up the machines and they set up the new packaging. And as the sponsor, and I told that to the sponsor, Mr. President. So may I just again reiterate the question to the sponsor if she's willing to accept the proposed
Is
amendment.
the sponsor accepting the proposed amendments?
Which one? This last one, Mr. President.
For the record, Mr. President, yes.
The-
For the record.
going back to section 3A, I mean, sorry, page 3A. That is the first one we're tackling. Manufactured and imported in the Philippines to replace the phrase found in the market.
Yes, manufactured or
Yeah.
imported into the Philippines.
Found in the market, replace the same. Manufactured and imported in the Philippines, instead found in the market. Let me just go back to that verse, Mr. President.
So what does this, the amendment to page 3A on lines 23 and 24 is to delete the phrase found in the market and instead replace the phrase with the following: manufactured or imported into the Philippines. What does the sponsor say?
May I just know from the proponent what is the reason for the change? Is there
Again, Mr. President, may I have a 1-minute suspension? Let me go backtrack to my records. Thank you.
1 minute suspension.
Yes. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
To answer the question of the distinguished lady, Mr. President, this is in relation to the next amendment. Without the next amendment, Mr. President, well, it doesn't really seem harmful, but it's up to the sponsor, Mr. President.
Mr. President, upon consultation with the proponent, since it's connected and we've explained the reason why we choose to retain our provision, then we also request that we retain the retain the language in on page 3A as is. And I've explained the same to the proponent earlier, Mr. President.
All right. So for the record, the proponent is no longer insisting
Pursuing the amendment,
the
yes.
amendment. Does the proponent confirm that, Senator Soto? You are confirming the agreement during the break.
Well, I'd rather that the distinguished lady did not accept my proposal, Mr. President,
All right.
Well,
instead
then
of my
yes.
withdrawing.
In that case, we will have to regret that we reject the proposed amendment, Mr.
All right.
President.
The The
Thank you, Mr.
sponsor,
President. For the record,
declines
thank
to
you.
accept.
Okay, now, Mr. President, on page 4A, line 13,
For
there
a-
was a discussion during the time of the individual amendments being proposed by Senator Enrile. And they were discussing about the variations of picture-based health warnings from 16 to 8 and 8 to 16.
From 8 to 16.
Yes. I was informed, Mr. President, that during the time that this was being proposed, it was not validated then by Senator Enrile, that we found out this is not the norm in other countries, especially in the ASEAN. Singapore only has 6 variations in 2004 and 6 variations in 2006. Brunei had 6 variations up to 2012. Malaysia, 6 variations. Indonesia have 5 variations. At 16 versions over a 24-month period, each health warning will only appear 45 days. Whereas for 8 versions, each version will appear for 90 days, thereby allowing the consumer more time to each version. If it's effective, it's better to stay longer, and it retained in the consciousness, Mr. President. This is actually better as far as advertisement is concerned. During that time, I think Senator Enrile proposed this, but there was it was not manifested as far as the norm of other countries is concerned, Mr. President. So if you will accept, Mr. President, I move to delete the word and figure 16 and replace them with the word and figure of 8.
So, in other words, reinstate the old provision. What does the sponsor say?
Actually, Mr. President, Senator Enrile and I discussed this. When the a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Before we suspend, there were 2 amendments on 913. The word minimum, it used to be the provision was a minimum of 8 variations. And after the Enrile amendment proposed 16 versions and a maximum, and the word maximum instead of minimum.
Yes.
So
Maximum of 16.
yes,
Naging
maximum
awarding.
16.
Yes.
That's the amendment.
And I'm prepared to further clarify, Mr. President.
Please.
We must take note that prior to the Enrile amendment, the committee report indicated a period of 12 months for 8 variations. So this is 8 variations within a 12-month period. Senator Enrile's amendment was a maximum of 8, but when I pointed out to him that we are now talking about a 2-year period instead of a 1, then he agreed to 16 because basically it would be roughly still 8 in a year, although in a different kind of rotation. So really we did not change anything. We pretty much preserved 8 within a 12-month period. And more significantly is we accepted the amendment which is maximum, because that's a big difference from a minimum of 8 onward. It could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 30, and now we say a maximum of 16 in 2 years, which boils down to a maximum of 8 within a year, in another way of putting it.
So what does the sponsor say, Mr. President?
So, unfortunately, I will have to reject because it was already a subject of the earlier amendment of Senator Enrile, and I believe that the concern raised by Senator Enrile was addressed, and I regret that we have to reject the proposal to bring it back to 8 within a longer period of time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. My batting average is very poor, Mr. President. Let me I prefer the RH bill, Mr. President. She accepted most of my proposed amendments during that time. Anyway, kung kailan magkakampi kami doon.
Actually, if I may just put on record, it's only because Senator Enrile was very thorough with his amendment. So, naiwan na lang po, for lack of a better term, latak na lang po yung naiwan sa inyo.
Okay, thank
Kaya,
you. Yes,
medyo hindi
I
ko
agree.
na,
I agree.
Hirap na po ako to, but
Yes.
I am trying my best to accommodate.
Mr.
Rest
President,
assured.
I agree, and I will confirm what the sponsor said. 80% of my proposed amendments were proposed by Senator Enrile already. Anyway, let me go back to page 4, line 10. I propose to delete the phrase "in accordance with guidelines prescribed by the DOH or in the absence thereof." The reason, Mr. President, the section 5E will now read, "The picture-based health warning shall be printed in full color with the resolution of 300 dpi using 4-color printing." Now, the reason is that guidelines become superfluous with the adoption of the proposed amendment. Given that the DOH is the implementing agency, retaining the phrase "in accordance with guidelines issued by the DOH or in the absence thereof" also gives the wrong conclusion that the DOH can prescribe a higher resolution or more colors if it wants to. Because this is because the resolution of 300 dpi using 4-color printing will only operate in the absence of DOH guidelines under the present wording in section 5E.
If I may respond.
Yes, Mr. President.
Actually, I am in possession of a amendment submitted by Senator Cheese, and I also spoke to him earlier. It's very similar to his Honor's amendment, and I think it will address his concern. This is the deletion on the same page 4, line 11 of the phrase "or in the absence thereof." So if we delete that phrase alone, it is clear that DOH will, it must be full color with a resolution of 300. And of course, we still acknowledge that DOH can still provide guideline, but will not stray from this 304 colors. So I believe that will address the confusion if His Honor will accept that counter proposal.
Yes, Mr. President, I will accept that.
Thank you.
So I move that we delete "or in the absence thereof."
And we
Instead.
accept, Mr. President.
The proposed amendment is accepted. Any objection? Hearing none, approved. Does that satisfy some of those
Yes.
people at the back of the sponsor, because they keep on nodding their heads and raising their thumbs up? They appear to be happy with the amendment.
Perhaps, Mr. President.
May we know who they are?
My staff, Mr.
Your
President.
staff. Yeah, some I don't see them quite often in the Senate. Maybe some of them are new staff.
She's pregnant. She's pregnant. That's why, Mr. President. She just came over for this.
Thank you.
And on page 11, lines 24 to 28, Mr. President. May I know, section 18, the rationale for other obligations of the tobacco industry. Ano po ang gusto natin doon? Because otherwise, it's better if we do not include this. Ano po ba? We should, or let's define what it is. Other obligations of the tobacco industry. Section 18, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, this is actually the same concern raised directly to our office by Philip Morris. They were asking us what are these other obligations. And our response, which is the same response I will put on the floor, is that we leave it up to the tobacco industry to have a social conscience and to continue with whatever they believe is their obligation as a citizen to inform the public of the health hazards of the product that they are selling. That's all. This is a catch-all phrase. We are not pinpointing anything, but it is just a declaration of the responsibility that lies within every corporate citizen.
Well, in other words, if the chair may raise a question, would would the deletion of Section 18 diminish the obligation of the manufacturer or the importer of this tobacco?
Diminish
because the way the sponsor responded, it is addressed to the social
pretty much, yes.
So that if there is no legal obligation that is diminished or that is deleted if this provision is.
Well, to answer your question, Mr. President, I can sleep well even if I agree to the deletion of this section. I put on record the reason why we want it here. We just want to be sure that just because they agree to graphic warnings doesn't mean that we are preventing them or that we do not want them to still be conscious of that social responsibility. By all means, if the recommendation, and I don't think there has been an amendment, but if the amendment is to delete,
yes,
like I said, I am
the reason I asked
willing.
is I wanted to propose the deletion para yung kaba nila, because what you received is the same thing that I received from the tobacco industry. That's why I'm bringing it up.
So that, yes, so we can delete this in order that
to satisfy.
the staff can be happy.
Yes.
Okay, so lines 24 to 28 on page 11,
Yes, Mr.
as
President.
proposed by Senator Soto and accepted by the sponsor, is deleted. And renumber accordingly the subsequent sections.
Yes, so move, Mr. President.
Yes, approved.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. President, just to clarify, and just in case it is not, then we'll propose the amendment. On page 12, line 4, when we say we repeal all the other laws, decrees, executive orders, this includes DOH administrative orders, no, Mr. President? Specifically, Section 13, Paragraph A to E of Republic Act 9211 and DOH administrative orders. This is included in the laws that are repealed. In the repealing clause. Lahat ito, ano?
His Honor is asking whether this phrase includes the repeal of the specific law and AO that he mentioned. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes, oh. Yes, Mr. President.
It does. Okay. Then I have no more proposed amendments, Mr. President. Thank you.
The operative act on Section 20 is that the laws, decrees, EOs, and administrative orders and parts thereof which are inconsistent with the provisions of this act.
Yes.
If they're inconsistent, once this act becomes law, then they are deemed
is
repealed.
repealed.
That's the
Yes.
standard.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr.
Yeah.
President. Let me read Section 20. All other laws, decrees, executive orders, and other administrative issuances and parts thereof, which are inconsistent with the provisions of this act, are hereby modified, superseded, or repealed accordingly. So only, as His Honor had pointed out, if they are inconsistent in
Okay.
that sense.
Thank you.
But I would also like to take this opportunity to reiterate the point that I raised during the period of amendment also with Senator Enrile, wherein we pointed out that it is very clear under this law that DOH retains, DOH is the implementing agency in charge of fully implementing this law, because I also put on record that there is an existing case which I am actually an intervener of, wherein the jurisdiction of the FDA to oversee, to implement and to oversee full implementation of health-related issues as far as tobacco products are concerned is being questioned. So I am saying for the record that as far as this bill is concerned, we're making it very clear that there is no doubt that it is DOH and its attached agencies, including FDA, that is the governing body.
Okay.
So that there
Thank
is
you.
no, well, sadly, I had also made the same statements in the last, when I defended that law, which is RA 9711, creating the Food and Drug Authority, and yet despite that, the tobacco companies still chose to question it. So I am making those same statements again, and I certainly hope that tobacco companies that are present here in the hall and have and are familiar with this would respect that, because that is the legislative intent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just
Thank
one
you.
manifestation, Mr. President, if the committee will not mind. Will you look into the, just review the penalties? Because I was browsing through the penalties and I noticed that the penalties being imposed are stiffer than the Dangerous Drugs Act, Mr. President. So,
If His Honor would
baka
like,
pwedeng ipantay na dun sa Dangerous Drugs Act.
I am open if His Honor would like to take a moment and give us. I mean, during the committee, the period of committee amendments, we did reconsider and lowered the penalty for some, I think, for the third offense. But if His Honor will make
If the
recommendations,
chair
we
may
are-
interrupt,
Yes.
I have seen the House version. It is lower. So may I suggest that, notwithstanding the passage on third reading of this bill containing this kind of penalties, that in the bicameral conference committee, the Senate panel would carry that mandate of having flexibility insofar as
The
the
penalties.
are concerned.
Oh,
I think
thank you, Mr. President. I
Yes,
am
Mr.
satisfied with
President.
that. Thank you. And thank you to the distinguished lady for
all right.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other individual amendment being proposed to this measure? If there are no further individual amendments, can we consider the period for individual amendments terminated? Majority Leader?
Mr. President, no other senator has expressed his or her intent to propose individual amendments. I move that we close the period for individual
Period for individual amendments is terminated. Come on.
I believe so. I'm not aware. None of our colleagues have
Yes,
approached
so-
us, Mr. President.
President,
so if there's no other.
There being no other person to propose individual amendments, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 27 under Committee Report number 19.
Senate Bill number 27 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move for the consideration of the second additional reference of business.
Can we first suspend consideration of Senate Bill?
I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number
Consideration of Senate Bill number 27. is
number
hereby
27
suspended.
under Committee Report number 19.
So suspended.
Mr. President, I move for the consideration of the second additional reference of business.
Secretary will read the additional reference of business.
Second
Mr.
additional reference of business.
Okay,
Mr.
before
President.
that, yes, Senator Soto.
May I know the parliamentary status of the bill, the graphic health warning?
Well, we just
approved it on second reading.
Sure.
Approved it on second reading.
Yes.
May I know how my vote was counted, Mr. President?
Counted in the affirmative.
Yes, Mr. President, may I just manifest that indeed, yes, it is in the affirmative, but with the manifestation that the sponsor will inform us on our proposal about the master cases.
On the master. Yes. Okay.
I informed the proponent that during the BICAM, we will present options on the on how the master cases will be handled.
All right. Duly noted. So we can now proceed with the second additional reference of business.
Bill on first reading. Senate number 2268, entitled An Act Amending Republic Act number 3591 as amended, and other related laws to enhance the resolution and liquidation framework for banks and banking institutions and to strengthen the independence, authority, and financial capability of the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation and for other purposes, introduced by Senators Mena III.
Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
Committee reports. Committee report number 40, prepared and submitted by the Committee on National Defense Security on Senate number 2269, with Senator Trillanes IV as author thereof, entitled An Act Amending Section 4B of Republic Act number 7898, otherwise known as the AFP Modernization Act as amended by Republic Act number 10349, establishing the revised AFP Modernization Program and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate number 1658, sponsored Senator Trillanes IV.
Calendar for Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 41, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Women, Family Relations, and Gender Equality and Constitutional Amendments Revision of Codes on Senate number 2270, with Senators Maria Lourdes Nancy Espinay, Cayetano P., and Defensor Santiago as authors thereof, entitled An Act Ensuring the Fundamental Equality of Men and Women under the Laws on Marriage and Family Relations, amending for the purpose Executive Order number 209, otherwise known as the Family Code of the Philippines, and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 1260 and 2072, sponsor Senator Cayetano P.
Calendar for Ordinary Business.
Committee report number 42, submitted by the Committee on Women, Family Relations, and Gender Equality on Senate number 1647, introduced by Senator Maria Lourdes Nancy Espina, entitled An Act Repealing the Crime of Premature Marriage under Article 351 of Act number 3185, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Cayetano P.
Ordinary Business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number 2270 under Committee Report number 41 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 2270 is hereby transferred from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
I move that we consider Senate Bill number 2270 under Committee Report number 41.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of Senate Bill 2270 is in order.
May we request the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary will read the title.
An act ensuring the fundamental equality of men and women under the laws on marriage and family relations, amending for the purpose Executive Order number 209, otherwise known as the Family Code of the Philippines, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize Senator Pia Cayetano to sponsor the measure.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, our country has proudly accepted recognition as one of the most gender-equal nations in the world. The Philippines is the best performer in the Asia-Pacific region when it comes to equality between genders, and we have been identified as a global leader in gender equality, outranking even the United States and the United Kingdom. However, despite the landmark legislation we have passed and have been recognized for, there remains vestiges of gender insensitivity and discrimination against women in our laws. As such, I rise before you today to sponsor 2 committee reports seeking to amend provisions that are unjustly biased against women and eliminate the inequality between genders as codified in our current law. These are amendments to the Family Code. The first is Committee Report number 41, which introduces amendments to Executive Order number 209, otherwise known as the Family Code of the Philippines. The Family Code, as amended, contains several provisions that hold the decision of the husband or father supreme over that of the wife or mother. As a background, Mr. President, Executive Order 209 was a presidential proclamation made in 1987, almost 30 years ago. And although it introduced many subsequent changes, gender-biased provisions, which are remnants of the Civil Code, passed in 1950, still remain. To wit, Article 14, which deals with the requirement of parental consent for marriage of a child aged between 18 and 21 years old, accords primacy to the consent of the father over the mother. Articles 96 and 124, which deals with the administration of community property and conjugal partnership respectively, state that although administration and enjoyment belong to both spouses jointly, the husband's decision shall prevail in case of disagreement. The wife's only recourse is to bring such matter before the courts. Article 211 states that the father and mother shall jointly exercise parental authority over their common children, but the father's decision shall prevail in case of disagreement. The rearing of children is a joint and collaborative effort between the father and mother. There is no rational explanation for according more weight to the decision of the father in the exercise of parental authority. Finally, Article 225, which states that the father and mother shall jointly exercise legal guardianship over the property of their unemancipated common child, once again holds the father's decision supreme in case of disagreement. Thus, the proposed measures seek to amend the preceding provisions to give equal weight to the decision of the husband or father and the wife or mother. This way, we eliminate the undue prejudice against women, and the law can now accord the same weight to the decision of either spouse or parent in important matters concerning their marriage and family. Amendments to the Revised Penal Code. Committee Report number 42, on the other hand, seeks to amend Article number 38, Act number 3815, or the Revised Penal Code, which is a modified version of the Spanish Penal Code of 1870. Mr. President, this law was enacted in 1932, or a full 82 years ago. Thus, there is certainly a need to revisit some provisions that have been outdated through the decades. Mr. President, one such provision is Article 351, which punishes women who contracted premature marriages. The crime of premature marriages punishes any widow who shall marry within 301 days from the date of the death of her husband.
With the permission of
Yes, Mr. President.
with the sponsor, have you finished the sponsorship of Senate Bill 2270? Because from the impression of the chair is that you are already going into the sponsorship of another bill.
Mr. President.
Yes. Can we have 1 minute suspension?
Yes, okay.
Wait. Hindi. Ano pa ito na hindi pa na-assign?
Ready to resume.
Session is resumed. The sponsor is recognized once
Yes.
more.
Mr. President, may I move to delete the portion of my speech where I made reference to the amendments to the revised penal code.
All right. So the portion of the sponsorship speech which refers to the revised penal code and obviously to Senate Bill
Committee report number 42. I
Committee
move that
Report
that
number
be deleted
42
from the record.
is hereby deleted from the record.
Yes, Mr. President. And that ends my sponsorship speech for committee report number 41.
All right.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number
No,
16.
can we first
Suspend consideration
Okay.
of Committee Report number 41.
All right. Consideration of Committee Report number 41, reporting out Senate Bill 2270 is hereby suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number 1647 under Committee Report number 42 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 1467 under Committee Report number 42 is transferred from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1647 under Committee Report number 42.
Consideration of the measure is in order.
May we request the Secretary to read the title?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
An act repealing the crime of premature marriage under Article 351 of Act Number 3815, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code.
I move that we once again recognize Senator Pia Cayetano to sponsor the measure.
Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee report number 42 is a result of our hearings where we are continually reviewing laws that are discriminatory towards women. Committee report number 42 seeks to amend Act number 3815 or the revised penal code, which is a modified version of the Spanish Penal Code of 1870. Yes, let me just correct that. Act number 3815. Mr. President, may I move to delete that portion of my speech? Let me just read it once again. Committee report number 42 seeks to amend Act number 351 or the revised penal code, which is a modified version of the Spanish Penal Code of 1870. Mr. President, this law was enacted in 1932, or a full 82 years ago. Thus, there is certainly a need to revisit some provisions that have been outdated through the decades. Mr. President, one such provision of Article 351, which punishes women who contract premature marriages. The crime of premature marriages punishes any widow who shall marry within 301 days from the date of the death of her husband, or before having delivered if she shall have been pregnant at the time of his death. Likewise, a woman whose marriage shall have been annulled or dissolved shall be penalized if she shall marry before her delivery or before the expiration of 301 days after the legal separation. This is an antiquated provision that perpetuates discrimination against women in our laws. Article 351 effectively enforces a mourning period for women, while no such law applies to men. More importantly, it restricts the right of a woman to marry by making such act a crime punishable by law. Thus, Committee Report number 42 seeks to expressly repeal Article 351 of the Revised Penal Code, thereby removing a barrier to women's equal right to marriage and doing away with a part of our law that discriminates against women. As enshrined in our Constitution, the state recognizes the role of women in nation building and shall ensure the fundamental equality before the law of women and men. I humbly ask for the support of my colleagues in getting our laws up to speed and earnestly seek the swift passage of this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1647 under Committee Report number 42.
Consideration of Senate Bill number 1647 is hereby suspended.
Mr. President, before we adjourn, may we consider some administrative matters? With the permission of the Senate, I move to transfer the referral of the following bills from the Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises to the Committee on Urban Planning, Housing, and Resettlement. These are Senate Bills number 2161 and House Bill number 3899, both entitled An Act Creating the Quezon City Development Authority, defining its powers and functions, providing for its organizational structure and capitalization.
So transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we designate the following members to the Senate contingent of the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on the Automated Election System, created under Republic Act number 8436 as amended by Republic Act number 9369. For the majority, Senator Pimentel; 2, Senator Poe; 3, Senator Aquino; and 4, Senator Villar. For the minority, Senator Ejercito; 2, Senator Honasan; and 3, Senator Soto. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Carried.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, June 4, 2014.
Session is adjourned until June 4, 2014 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Pia.